John-Peterson's laugh cut through the air like a knife. Elisa felt every eye in the room turn toward her, the weight of their judgment settling on her shoulders like a physical burden. "Oh, sweetheart," Carolina said, her voice dripping with condescension as she addressed the 12 dinner guests assembled around the table. "Did you all hear what she just said? She thinks she understands investment portfolios." Carolina's perfectly manicured hand fluttered to her chest in mock surprise. "How adorable. I suppose they teach basic math wherever you're from, don't they, dear?" Elisa's fingers tightened around her wine glass, but her face remained serene. She had promised herself she wouldn't react, wouldn't give Carolina the satisfaction of seeing her break. Across the table, Carlos's jaw clenched, his knuckles white against the tablecloth. "Mother, that's enough," he said, his voice tight with controlled anger. "Don't be silly, darling. I'm simply having a conversation with your wife." The pause before the word was deliberate, loaded with everything Carolina refused to say aloud. It's not her fault she doesn't understand how real wealth works. Some people simply aren't born into these circumstances. Margaret Rothschild, seated to Carolina's right, cleared her throat uncomfortably. "Carolina, perhaps we should." No, it's perfectly fine," Carolina interrupted, her smile widening as she turned her attention fully to Elisa. "I think it's important that we're all honest here. Transparency, after all, is the foundation of any relationship. Wouldn't you agree, Elisa?" Elisa met her mother-in-law's gaze steadily. "I believe respect is the foundation of any relationship, Carolina." The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. Carolina's eyes narrowed, her smile becoming razor-sharp. "Respect is earned, my dear. Not bought with pretty words and convenient timing." She took a delicate sip of her wine before continuing. "You know, I've been thinking about your wedding. Such a rushed affair. Private ceremony, no guests, no announcement. One might think someone was trying to trap my son before he came to his senses." "Mother!" Carlos pushed back from the table, his chair scraping loudly against the hardwood floor. "Sit down, Carlos," Carolina commanded, her voice suddenly steel. "We're all adults here. Surely your wife can handle an honest conversation." Elisa placed her hand gently on Carlos's arm, her touch calming him. She had endured worse than this in boardrooms filled with men who underestimated her. She could survive one woman's petty cruelty. "It's fine, Carlos." "Really?" She turned to Carolina with a practiced smile. "You're right, Carolina. Our wedding was private. We wanted something intimate, just the two of us. Sometimes the most meaningful moments don't require an audience." "How convenient," Carolina said softly. "And how fortunate for you that my son is too kind-hearted to see through such obvious manipulation." The other guests had fallen silent, their discomfort palpable. Even Carolina's closest friend seemed unsure where to look. But Carolina was just getting started. "Tell me, Elisa, what exactly did you do before you met my son? I don't believe you've ever given us a straight answer about your career." "I work in technology," Elisa replied evenly. "Technology?" Carolina repeated the word as if it tasted sour. "How delightfully vague. You see, darling, this is exactly what concerns me. You know everything about our family, our business, our assets. But we know virtually nothing about you. Doesn't that strike anyone else as suspicious?" "What strikes me as suspicious," Carlos interjected, his voice dangerously quiet, "is your determination to attack my wife at every opportunity." Carolina's expression softened as she looked at her son, transforming into a mask of wounded innocence. "Attack? Oh, sweetheart, I would never attack anyone. I'm simply trying to protect you. That's what mothers do. We see things our children are too blinded by infatuation to notice." "I'm not blinded by anything," Carlos said firmly. "I love Elisa. I chose her. And you need to accept that." "Love?" Carolina laughed, the sound bitter and hollow. "You think this is about love? My naive boy. This is about protecting what generations of Petersons have built. This is about ensuring our family legacy doesn't fall into the wrong hands. Elisa felt something cold settle in her chest. She had known Carolina disapproved of her, had known the older woman harbored prejudices she was too polite to name outright. But hearing it stated so baldly, in front of all these people, was different. The wrong hands, Elisa repeated slowly. You mean hands like mine? I mean hands that reach for things they haven't earned, Carolina shot back. Hands that grab at opportunities that aren't meant for them. The racist subtext wasn't even subtext anymore. It hung in the air between them, ugly and undeniable. That's it, Carlos said, throwing his napkin onto the table. Elisa, we're leaving. No. Elisa's voice was calm but firm. She stood gracefully, her posture perfect, her dignity intact despite everything. Thank you for the dinner, Carolina. It was enlightening. Carolina stood as well, moving around the table with predatory grace. Don't you dare walk away from me when I'm speaking to you. You may have fooled my son, but you don't fool me. I know exactly what you are. And what am I, Carolina? Elisa asked, her voice soft but steady. A gold digger. A social climber. A woman who saw an opportunity and seized it without any thought for the damage you'd cause. Carolina's voice rose with each word. You don't belong in this family. You don't belong in this world. And eventually, when the novelty wears off and Carlos sees you for what you really are, you'll be cast aside. And you'll leave with nothing, because I'll make sure of it. The silence that followed was deafening. Even Carolina's staunchest allies looked appalled. Elisa felt something shift inside her. She had tried patience. She had tried kindness. She had tried to give Carolina the chance to know her as a person, to love her for who she was rather than what she had achieved. But clearly, that approach wasn't working. I see, Elisa said quietly. Thank you for being so honest about your feelings. Oh, don't play the victim, Carolina snapped. You knew exactly what you were getting into when you seduced my son. I didn't seduce anyone, Elisa said, her voice gaining strength. I fell in love with a wonderful man who treats me with respect and kindness. Something you clearly know nothing about. Carolina's face flushed with anger. How do you speak to me that way in my own home? How do you speak to your son's wife that way anywhere? Elisa countered. You talk about protecting your family legacy, but all you're doing is destroying your relationship with your son. Is that really what you want? What I want, Carolina said through clenched teeth, is for you to disappear from our lives as quickly as you appeared in them. Carlos had heard enough. He took Elisa's hand, his grip protective and angry. We're done here. Don't call me unless you're ready to apologize. Apologize? Carolina's laugh was brittle. I have nothing to apologize for. I'm trying to save you from making the biggest mistake of your life. The biggest mistake of my life would be choosing you over her, Carlos said, his voice breaking slightly. I love you, mother. But I won't stand by while you treat the woman I love like this. They left without another word, the sound of Carolina's protest following them out into the cold San Francisco night. In the car, Elisa finally allowed herself to breathe. Her hands were shaking, and she clasped them together in her lap to still them. Carlos reached over, covering her hands with one of his own. I'm so sorry, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I had no idea she would go that far. It's not your fault, Elisa said softly. You can't control what she says or thinks. But I can control whether we subject ourselves to it. Carlos pulled into traffic, his jaw still tight. We're not going back there. Not until she learns to treat you with respect. Elisa leaned her head back against the seat, closing her eyes. Part of her wanted to tell him everything, to reveal who she really was, to watch Carolina's face when she realized the truth. But another part, the part that had fallen in love with Carlos for his kindness and integrity, still hoped that somehow, his mother might learn to see her as more than a stereotype. Do you want to talk about it? Carlos asked gently. Not yet, Elisa admitted. Right now, I just want to go home and forget this evening ever happened. But forgetting wasn't so easy. Over the next few weeks, Carolina's campaign against Elisa intensified. She called Carlos daily, each conversation a new attempt to convince him that his marriage was a mistake. She spread rumors through their social circle, painting Elisa as a manipulative gold digger who had trapped Carlos. She even went so far as to hire a private investigator to dig into Elisa's past. What she found only confused her more. Elisa had no debt, no criminal record, no history of targeting wealthy men. In fact, the investigator's report was frustratingly clean, revealing nothing Carolina could use as ammunition. Meanwhile, Elisa threw herself into her work, finding solace in the one place where her competence and intelligence were never questioned. Her company, Elitech Innovations, was on the verge of its biggest acquisition yet, a move that would solidify their position as a major player in the tech industry. The Peterson deal is almost finalized, her CFO, James Chen, said during their weekly strategy meeting. They're desperate for an investor. Their last 3 quarters have been disastrous. Elisa looked up from the financial report spread across her desk. The Peterson Company? As in Peterson Real Estate Development. That's the one. Old money, traditional business model, completely unprepared for the digital revolution. They need capital and modernization, and we need their commercial real estate portfolio for our expansion plans. It's a perfect match. Elisa's mind raced. Carolina's company. Her mother-in-law's family business was on the verge of collapse, and they were coming to Elitech for help. The irony was almost too perfect. Does the Peterson family know who we are? Elisa asked carefully. James shook his head. We've been working through intermediaries. Standard procedure for acquisitions of this size. The first face-to-face meeting is scheduled for next week. Why? No reason, Elisa said, though her heart was pounding. Just making sure we've done our due diligence. That evening, she sat Carlos down and told him about the potential acquisition. She watched his face carefully as understanding dawned. My mother's company, he asked, stunned. You're going to acquire my mother's company. Not exactly acquire. It's more of a merger with investment. They need capital and strategic direction. We need their real estate assets. It's purely business. Carlos ran his hands through his hair, a gesture Elisa had come to recognize as his way of processing stress. Does she know? Does my mother know that I'm the CEO of Elitech Innovations? No. I haven't told anyone in your family. Why not? Carlos asked, not accusatory, just genuinely confused. Why keep it a secret? Elisa stood and walked to the window, looking out over the city lights. Because I wanted her to like me for me. Not because of my money or my success. I wanted to prove that I loved you for who you are, not what you have. I thought if she got to know me first, if she saw me as a person rather than a balance sheet, maybe she could accept our marriage. How's that working out? Carlos asked dryly. Elisa laughed, but there was no humor in it. Not well, obviously. Carlos came to stand beside her, wrapping his arm around her waist. What are you going to do? The right thing, professionally. This merger makes sense for both companies. Whatever personal issues your mother and I have, I won't let them interfere with a sound business decision. She's going to lose her mind, Carlos said, a hint of satisfaction in his voice. Probably, Elisa agreed. But maybe, just maybe, it will make her see me differently. Make her understand that I'm not some helpless gold digger trying to take advantage of her son. The week before the meeting, Carolina's attacks reached a fever pitch. She organized a family dinner, specifically to introduce Carlos to Bethany Whitmore, the daughter of one of Carolina's oldest friends. The implication was clear, this is who you should have married. Elisa attended, her patience wearing thin but her resolve intact. She watched Carolina fawn over Bethany, praising her pedigree, her education, her family connections. Every compliment was a veiled insult, a reminder that Elisa would never measure up in Carolina's eyes. Bethany's family owns the Whitmore Gallery downtown, Carolina said brightly. Such a prestigious establishment. Her mother and I attended Wellesley together. Real education, real breeding. That's what matters in these circles. Bethany, to her credit, looked uncomfortable. Mrs. Peterson, I think we should. Nonsense, dear. I'm simply making conversation. Carolina turned her attention to Eliza with false sweetness. Where did you attend university, Eliza? You've never mentioned it. MIT, Eliza said simply. Computer Science and Business Administration. Double major. The table fell silent. Even Carolina seemed momentarily speechless. MIT? Bethany said, genuine interest in her voice. That's incredible. What year did you graduate? Summa cum laude, class of 2015, Eliza replied. Then I did my MBA at Stanford. Carolina recovered quickly, her expression hardening. How fascinating. And yet you've never worked for any notable companies. One would think someone with such impressive credentials would have a more visible career. Perhaps I've been busy building my own path, Eliza suggested mildly. Yes, in technology, Carolina said dismissively. Such a vague field. Anyone can claim to work in technology these days. Eliza felt Carlos tense beside her, preparing to defend her once again. But she placed a calming hand on his knee. Soon enough, Carolina would learn the truth. Soon enough, everything would change. The day of the merger meeting arrived. Eliza dressed with particular care that morning, choosing a power suit in deep navy blue that commanded respect without being ostentatious. She wore the diamond earrings Carlos had given her for their anniversary, a reminder of why she was doing this, why she had endured Carolina's abuse for so long. Are you sure about this? Carlos asked as she prepared to leave. He had taken the day off work, unable to concentrate knowing what was about to happen. I'm sure, Eliza said, kissing him gently. Whatever happens, we'll deal with it together. The Peterson Company's headquarters was an old building in the financial district, all marble columns and brass fixtures, a monument to old money and older attitudes. Eliza walked through the lobby with her team, her heels clicking confidently on the polished floor. The receptionist directed them to the executive boardroom on the 15th floor. As they rode the elevator up, Eliza could feel her team's nervous energy. They knew this was a big deal, though they didn't know the personal complications involved. Remember, she said calmly as the elevator dinged their arrival, we're here to present a fair offer that benefits both parties. Professional, courteous, firm. Nothing more, nothing less. The boardroom doors opened, and Eliza stepped through with her team behind her. The Peterson board members were already seated around the massive conference table. And there, at the head of the table, sat Carolina John-Peterson. The color drained from Carolina's face so quickly that for a moment, Eliza worried the older woman might actually faint. Carolina's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again, but no sound came out. Good morning, Eliza said pleasantly, extending her hand across the table. I'm Eliza Peterson, CEO of Eli Tech Innovations. Thank you for meeting with us today. The other board members looked between Carolina and Eliza, confusion evident on their faces. Clearly, Carolina had never mentioned that her daughter-in-law and the CEO of their potential savior company shared the same last name. You, Carolina finally managed, her voice barely above a whisper. Yes, me, Eliza confirmed. She gestured to her team. This is James Chen, our CFO, and Sarah Martinez, our Chief Strategy Officer. Shall we begin? For perhaps the first time in her life, Carolina John-Peterson was completely speechless. She stared at Eliza as if seeing her for the first time, her mind clearly struggling to reconcile the woman she had mocked and dismissed with the powerful CEO standing before her. I don't understand, Carolina said faintly. You're the CEO? You're the one who wants to acquire our company. Not acquire, exactly, Eliza corrected gently. We're proposing a merger and investment package that would stabilize your finances while allowing you to maintain operational autonomy. It's all detailed in the prospectus my team sent over last week. But you? Carolina trailed off, her usual eloquence completely deserting her. One of the other board members, a distinguished older gentleman named Richard Hayes, cleared his throat. Mrs. Peterson, is there a problem? Do you know MS? Mrs. Peterson. She's my daughter-in-law, Carolina said, the word seeming to cost her enormous effort. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. Richard Hayes's eyebrows shot up. Your daughter-in-law is the CEO of Elitech Innovations? Carolina, why didn't you mention this? Because I didn't know, Carolina admitted, and for the first time, Elisa heard something other than arrogance in her voice. She heard shock, embarrassment, and perhaps the first stirrings of understanding. Elisa took her seat at the table, crossing her legs with practiced ease. Shall we discuss the merger proposal? I understand you've all had a chance to review the terms. For the next 2 hours, Elisa conducted the meeting with the same competence and grace she brought to every business negotiation. She answered questions, addressed concerns, and presented her vision for the combined companies with clarity and confidence. Her team was equally professional, their expertise evident in every response. Through it all, Carolina sat in stunned silence, watching the woman she had dismissed as a gold digger command the room with effortless authority. This wasn't the meek, quiet daughter-in-law she thought she could intimidate. This was a force of nature, a brilliant businesswoman who held the future of the Peterson Company in her hands. When the presentation concluded, Richard Hayes leaned back in his chair with a satisfied expression. This is an excellent proposal, Mrs. Peterson. Your terms are more than fair, and your strategic vision aligns perfectly with where we need to take this company. I'm glad you think so, Elisa replied. We believe this partnership could be mutually beneficial. Partnership, Carolina finally spoke, her voice hoarse. You're offering a partnership? Not a takeover. That's correct, Elisa confirmed. Despite what you might think, I'm not interested in destroying your family's legacy. I'm interested in preserving it while building something even greater. The barb was subtle, but Carolina heard it clearly. Despite what you might think. All her accusations, all her insults, all her prejudice, laid bare in 4 simple words. I need some air, Carolina said abruptly, standing so quickly her chair nearly toppled backward. She fled the room, leaving the board members staring after her in confusion. Richard Hayes turned to Elisa apologetically. I'm sorry about that. Carolina has been under a great deal of stress lately. The company's financial troubles have been difficult for her. I understand, Elisa said graciously. Why don't we take a 15-minute break? Give everyone time to process the proposal and formulate any final questions. As her team filed out for coffee, Elisa found herself alone in the boardroom. She walked to the window, looking out over the city where she had built her empire, one line of code and one smart decision at a time. She had never needed the Peterson family's money or status. She had created her own. The door opened behind her, and she turned to find Carolina standing there, looking smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of her own realizations. How long? Carolina asked quietly. How long have you been the CEO? I founded Elitech Innovations 6 years ago, Elisa replied. Fresh out of Stanford. Started in a garage, the way all the best tech stories begin. We went public 3 years ago. Carolina moved to the window, standing a few feet away from Elisa but not looking at her. And you never told us. Never told Carlos. Carlos knows. He's always known, Elisa corrected. I just asked him not to tell you. I wanted you to get to know me first, to see me as a person rather than a dollar sign. But I didn't, did I? Carolina's voice cracked slightly. I saw exactly what I wanted to see. What I was taught to see. Elisa remained silent, letting Carolina work through her thoughts. I called you a gold digger, Carolina continued, her voice barely above a whisper. I accused you of chasing my son's money. When all this time, I'm worth 10 times what your family is, Elisa finished matter-of-factly. Yes. Carolina flinched at the blunt assessment. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you throw it in my face? God knows I gave you enough opportunities. Because that would have made me just as petty as your treatment of me, Elisa said. And because I didn't want our relationship to be based on money or status. I wanted it to be based on respect, on love for the same man we both care about. I wanted you to see me, Carolina. Really see me. And now I do, Carolina said bitterly. Now I see that I've been a complete fool. You've been a frightened mother trying to protect her son, Elisa said, surprised by the compassion in her own voice. I understand that. But you let fear turn into cruelty, and prejudice into action. That's what I can't excuse. Carolina finally turned to face her, tears streaking her perfectly made-up face. I don't even know where to begin apologizing. Everything I said, everything I did. God, what you must think of me. I think you're a woman who was raised with certain beliefs and never questioned them, Elisa said honestly. I think you've lived in a bubble of privilege so long, you forgot that merit and worth aren't determined by skin color or family name. I think you need to do better. I will, Carolina promised. I swear I will. But can you ever forgive me? Elisa considered the question carefully. I don't know yet. You've hurt me, Carolina. You've hurt Carlos. You made me doubt myself, made me question whether I was worthy of your son's love. That's not something I can just forget because you've been forced to confront the truth. I understand, Carolina said, nodding through her tears. I'll do whatever it takes to make this right. However long it takes. Then start by signing this merger agreement, Elisa said, her voice becoming businesslike once more. Your company needs help, and despite everything, I still believe this partnership makes sense. Can you put aside your personal feelings and do what's best for your business? Carolina actually laughed, the sound watery but genuine. You're asking me that? After everything? You'd still go through with this deal. Business is business, Elisa replied with a slight smile. And unlike you, I don't let personal prejudices interfere with sound financial decisions. The second half of the meeting went smoothly. Carolina, humbled and chastened, barely spoke except to approve the terms her board recommended. Richard Hayes shook Elisa's hand enthusiastically as they finalized the preliminary agreement. We'll have the lawyers draw up the contracts, he said. This is a new beginning for the Peterson Company. Thank you for this opportunity, Mrs. Peterson. Thank you for trusting us with your family's legacy, Elisa replied graciously. As her team prepared to leave, Carolina approached hesitantly. Would you tell Carlos what happened here today? He already knows, Elisa said. He's been waiting at home, probably wearing a hole in our carpet from pacing. He must hate me, Carolina said softly. He loves you, Elisa corrected. But he's disappointed in you. There's a difference. Carolina nodded, fresh tears threatening. Could I call him? Try to explain. That's between you and your son, Elisa said. But I'd suggest starting with a genuine apology. Not excuses, not justifications. Just an honest acknowledgement of what you've done and a commitment to change. I will, Carolina promised. And Elisa? Thank you. For this deal, for your professionalism, for not destroying us when you had every right to. Elisa gathered her briefcase and turned to leave, but paused at the door. You know, Carolina, the saddest part about all of this is that if you had just given me a chance, if you had looked past your prejudices for even a moment, we might have actually liked each other. We have more in common than you think. We're both strong women who've had to fight for our place in male-dominated industries. We both love Carlos more than anything. We could have been allies. Friends, even. Could we still? Carolina asked hopefully. Maybe, Elisa said thoughtfully. But you have a lot of work to do first. Starting with examining why you saw me the way you did, and committing to being better. Not just to me, but to everyone. Because I guarantee I'm not the only person you've judged and dismissed based on their race or background. With that, Elisa left, her team following behind her. As the elevator doors closed, she allowed herself a small smile. It wasn't victory, exactly. But it was justice. And perhaps, eventually, it might become something more. At home, Carlos practically tackled her when she walked through the door. How did it go? What happened? What did she say? Elisa laughed, holding him tight. It went well. The board approved the merger. Your mother was shocked, to put it mildly. I wish I could have seen her face, Carlos admitted. It was something to witness, Elisa agreed. But Carlos, she was genuinely remorseful. Genuinely shocked by her own behavior. That doesn't excuse what she did to you, Carlos said fiercely. No, it doesn't, Elisa agreed. But it's a start. She has a long way to go to earn my forgiveness, to earn my trust. But I think she might actually try this time. Over the following weeks, Carolina did try. She called Elisa to apologize, a conversation that lasted over 2 hours and left both women emotionally exhausted. She wrote letters to Carlos, acknowledging her failings and asking for his patience as she worked to become better. She even attended therapy, determined to understand the roots of her prejudice and overcome them. The merger proceeded smoothly, and Elisa found herself working closely with the Peterson company's board. She was professional but distant with Carolina, polite but not warm. Trust, she had learned, was earned slowly and lost quickly. 3 months after the boardroom revelation, Carolina invited Elisa and Carlos to dinner. Just the 3 of them, she specified. No audience, no performance. Just family. Elisa almost declined, but Carlos convinced her to give his mother one more chance. She's really trying, he said. I've never seen her like this. Humble. Reflective. Honest about her faults. So they went. Carolina's home, once a place of torment for Elisa, now seemed different somehow. Less imposing, more vulnerable. Carolina herself was different too. She wore less makeup, simpler clothes. She seemed more real, more human. Thank you for coming, Carolina said as she opened the door. I know you didn't have to. Dinner was simple but delicious, and the conversation was surprisingly genuine. Carolina asked about Elisa's work, really listening to the answers. She shared stories about Carlos's childhood, funny anecdotes that made him blush and Elisa laugh. She didn't try to defend her past behavior or make excuses. She simply tried to be present, to be better. As dessert was served, Carolina set down her fork and looked directly at Elisa. I've been thinking about what you said. About how we might have been friends if I'd given you a chance. I'd like that chance now, if you're willing to give it to me. Elisa studied her mother-in-law carefully. She saw regret in Carolina's eyes, but also hope. She saw the weight of privilege being confronted with its own blindness. She saw a woman trying, genuinely trying, to be better than she had been. I'm willing to try, Elisa said slowly. But Carolina, you need to understand something. This isn't just about me and you. It's about how you see the world, how you treat people who don't look like you or come from where you come from. Real change means examining those beliefs every day, challenging them, growing beyond them. I know, Carolina said earnestly. I've started volunteering at a community center in Oakland. Working with young entrepreneurs, helping them navigate business challenges. Most of them are Black or Latino, and every single one of them has taught me something about my own ignorance. It's humbling. But necessary. Carlos reached across the table, taking his mother's hand. I'm proud of you, Mom. This couldn't have been easy. It shouldn't be easy, Carolina replied. I spent 60 years being comfortable in my prejudices. A few months of discomfort is the least I can endure. As the evening wore on, Elisa felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet. But the possibility of it. The understanding that people could change, could grow, could become more than their worst moments. A year later, Elisa stood at a podium in the grand ballroom of the Fairmont Hotel, addressing a crowd of over 500 people at the Women in Technology Leadership Conference. The annual event celebrated women breaking barriers in the tech industry, and this year, Elisa was the keynote speaker. "When I started Eli Tech Innovations 6 years ago," she said, her voice carrying clearly through the sound system, "I faced every obstacle you can imagine. Investors who wouldn't take meetings with a young black woman. Partners who assumed I was the assistant, not the CEO. A society that told me in 1,000 subtle ways that I didn't belong in their world." She paused, letting her gaze sweep across the audience. She saw young women of all races hanging on her every word, saw the hope and determination in their eyes. "But I also learned something important. Your worth is not determined by other people's perception of you. Your value is not measured by their comfort with your presence. You define yourself. You build your own legacy. And when people underestimate you, you use it as fuel to prove them wrong." In the front row, Carlos sat next to his mother. Carolina's eyes were bright with tears, but she was smiling. Since that dinner a year ago, she and Elisa had built something tentative but real. Not quite mother and daughter, but something approaching friends. Carolina now served on the board of Eli Tech Innovations, using her business experience to mentor younger executives. She had become an advocate for diversity in the industry, speaking openly about her own journey from prejudice to understanding. "I want to tell you about someone who taught me an unexpected lesson," Elisa continued, looking directly at Carolina. "Someone who judged me harshly, who saw only my race and assumed it defined my worth. Someone who had to confront their own biases in the most uncomfortable way possible." Carolina met her gaze steadily, not flinching from the truth. "That person is my mother-in-law, and she's here tonight. And you know what? Her journey taught me something important too. It taught me that change is possible. That prejudice, while deeply rooted, can be uprooted with effort and honesty. That redemption is real if the commitment to growth is genuine." She smiled, and Carolina smiled back, understanding and accepting. "So to all of you facing discrimination, facing doubt, facing people who tell you that you don't belong, I say this: be excellent. Be undeniable. Build something so remarkable that it cannot be ignored. But also, leave room for grace. Leave room for people to grow. Because sometimes, the people who need to see you most clearly are the ones who are most blinded by their own limitations." The audience erupted in applause. Elisa stepped down from the podium and made her way to her family. Carlos stood and embraced her, whispering how proud he was. And Carolina, tears streaming down her face, pulled Elisa into a hug. "Thank you," Carolina whispered. "For giving me the chance to be better. For believing I could change." "Thank you for actually changing," Elisa replied softly. "For doing the work." As they left the ballroom together, a real family now rather than one divided by prejudice and misunderstanding, Elisa felt something she hadn't felt in a long time: peace. The journey had been painful, the battles hard fought. But they had emerged on the other side stronger, wiser, and more united than before. If you enjoyed this story of resilience, growth, and the power of proving your worth, please like this video, leave a comment sharing your thoughts, and subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories. Your support means everything and helps us continue bringing you powerful narratives about overcoming prejudice and building bridges across divides. Thank you for watching. The night air was cool as they walked to their cars, but Elisa felt warm, surrounded by the two people who mattered most. Her husband, who had always believed in her. And her mother-in-law, who had learned to believe in her too. It hadn't been the journey she expected, but it had led her exactly where she needed to be.